Minister, I think one of the simple facts that most people understand is failure to plan is planning to fail. And, you know, my deputy before me said how often we've stood on this floor. I've stood on this floor 60 times in my short political career to discuss disabilities. And I have to say, it's a terrible situation that I have to be able to tell you that things are getting worse. They're not getting better, despite the fact that you believe you're pumping money in. Things are going backwards. I mean, you set up 93 CDNT teams around the country. And as it stands, there's 817 vacancies. 817. Let me just read what a letter that was sent out to a family in New Ross, constituents of mine. I'm not going to read it all, I'm going to read the pertinent bit. Children Disability Services have undergone significant reform and restructuring nationally with the implementation of progressing disability services. Children's Disability Network teams were launched in the South East Community Healthcare in September 2021. This letter is less than 6 months old. The core objective of this change was to ensure that children with complex interdisciplinary needs and their families would receive an appropriate family-centred service. This transition has been faced with many challenges across the South East community healthcare. Challenges include, but are not limited to, recruitment and retention of staff, the implementation of a new model of service, delivery and pre-existing waiting lists of services. The approved staffing for New Ross Children's Disability Network is 9.5 clinical posts and 1.55 administrative management posts. As of now, there are currently 3.7 clinical posts only filled and 5.8 vacant. There are 274 children registered. The vacant clinical posts on the team are across the disciplines of occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, nursing and dietetics. Now, Minister, that's going backwards. What is the point, I've said it before, of having teams that are not fully staffed? We would be better having full teams in the centre of the county and provide the transport to get them there. Because this is just the same as CAMHS. It's a non-service. If a child doesn't receive the early intervention, we are stacking up these problems for the future. And the CDNT, to me, I've said it before, is a complete failure. It is since 2021, we're 4 years in now and things haven't improved, they've gotten worse. There's been reviews done with parents, with service users, there's been recommendations made, none of which have been implemented. And throwing good money after bad policy doesn't work, but it is certainly a trait of this government. I want to move on to where we move from child services to actual adult employment services. And it's very, very disappointing for the Section 39s who employ adults under the disability programme. So this comes from Kilcannon Garden Centre in Enniscorthy, who made huge representation through a series of political representatives, both in government and outside government pre-budget, where they asked that the wage subsidy scheme for community service programmes would be increased, because they have 17 employees alone with intellectual disability employed in Kilcannon Garden Centre. There has been no provisions made to increase the wage subsidy scheme. Now, this is a garden centre, but it has a restaurant element to it, a cafe element to it. And like all cafes, private and none are under severe pressure, not least because you haven't reduced the VAT rate. But you saw our protest today, that's the sector for profit. This is a Section 39. And it's failure to plan. 17 people with intellectual disabilities may soon find themselves out of a job. I think that's absolutely despicable. I think the lack of consideration for these people and their families is beyond reproach. When I started or ran for election first, all I heard from the disability sector was we don't see politicians from one end of the year to the other, and 5 years in between elections. And what do we get the minister doing last week? Cabinet agreeing to implement the UN protocol for people with disabilities. Now, you know, and I know, this House is full of talk of an election. It's more false hope. If we go ahead with the election, maybe we won't. Because if there's any reason why I hope we won't, it's so that you will implement the UN protocol. It takes a series of weeks. And I will be reminding you every step of the way, if an election is called, that all that is wolf whistling or whatever the hell they call it to garner votes. Because you've had 5 years to do it. Since 2008. It was ratified by this House in 2018.
Thank you, Deputy.
And the week before a purported election, you decide that you're going to implement it. I tell you, Ceann Comhairle, I very much hope for the 13.5% of people with disabilities that this is carried out.
Thank you.